We are here today. Chris is at Miracle Camp, and he is speaking this whole weekend up at Miracle Camp in Michigan. And so we have the opportunity to come and have a conversation with some of our elder team as we continue on this series of fighting the good fight. And so we are going to take some time. We've been in this series, and we've been talking about how we are in a fight. But this fight isn't against a person or a group of people, but this is a spiritual battle, and that everything we do is spiritual. And so we want to be sure that we're fighting the right fight, and we want to be sure that we're prepared for the fight that we are about to fight and we are in. And so we have an opportunity just to hear from our elders, from their experiences, from the things that they have learned. But before we dive in, we want to get to know them a little bit. So we're going to ask that you just share a little bit about yourself, about your families, and how you got connected to City Church.
Great. Good morning, City Church. How are you today? Good. I want to do like the Pastor Chris thing. Like I always dreamed about doing that. So I'm going to give a shout out to the people online. We've got a few friends of ours that we used to live with in London. John and Christina Lucas. They live in South America, in Peru. And then I'm going to also give a shout out to my mom. Bonjour, maman. Who's watching us, from France. Thank you. So you probably gathered from my accent. I'm not from here. So I was born in the second smallest country in the world, Monte Carlo. And if you follow Formula One, that's one of the famous races, but it's on the southeast of France, on the French Riviera, about 10 miles from the Italian border. And we've been here for 6.5 years. So I grew up in a family that was not Christian. I accepted Jesus in my life when I was 27 years of age. And I met my wife 2 years later, and she's sitting right there, my beautiful wife, Melissa. We've been married now for 13 years. We've got 3 children together. We've got Micah, who's the oldest, is 11. Then we got Noah, who's 10. They're both here. They're so ashamed that I'm naming them right now here. And then we got a little girl, Talia, who's 8 years old. She'll be in the kids program. Our journey here is really down to my wife. She was born here, and then she spent the first 11 years in her life in Ecuador. Her parents were missionaries there. But then when they came back, her dad ran a church in Auburn for about 30 years. So that's the connection to Fort Wayne. Before that, we're living in London, England. We came to know about City Church really because when City Church started, they were looking for an office. And my wife was actually working on this campus. And when Chris came to her to look at a place, she said, hey, we need to check up that church. So she went, I went, and we never looked back. We've been here for 4.5 years. About 2-3 months after we joined the church, Chris started an advisory team, and he invited me to be part of that team that transitioned to an elder team about 2 years ago. And it's been a pure joy to be on that team and to serve this church. My day life, what I do, I work in private equity investments, and I also started a business. But the joy of my heart is for the last 15 months, I had the opportunity to homeschool the children. And it's been so good and so fun and so tiring. Among other things, I've got a passion. I love cooking. My mom was a chef. I grew up in a kitchen. And we live a block away. So if you see us in our yards, please come and say hi. And if we have food, we'll invite you for dinner or lunch.
I also wanted to be like Pastor Chris, and I almost wore glasses just so I could adjust them the entire time, but I decided against it.
Good morning, City Church. We can do a little bit better than that. So the 9 o'clock was a little bit more enthusiastic, so we're going to try that again. Good morning, City Church. There it is. There it is. Well, my name is Aaron Lane, and before I go into a little bit about myself, I want to take time to really just thank you all who are sitting in the chairs, but also you online. As elders, obviously we're deeply involved, but we don't take you choosing to do your spiritual walk, your spiritual journey with City Church. We know that one of the most important decisions you will make in your life is who you allow to speak into your life spiritually. So Pastor Chris being able to have that privilege on a weekly basis and us being able to make sure that he's stewarding well over all of you is important. So again, we thank you for choosing to be a part of the City Church family. Again, whether you're new, whether you come every Sunday, we welcome you and we meet you right where you are. So we just thank you for allowing us to journey with you on that walk. As mentioned, my name is Aaron Lane. I am born and raised in Southeast Fort Wayne, so I am passionate about community. I've been here all of my life outside of going off to college at Purdue, and then I spent a short time span in Miami. But God knew where I belonged. He called me back to Fort Wayne to serve. And on that journey of coming back to Fort Wayne, I met the most amazing woman that I'll say kind of ushered me further into my spiritual walk and my identity, my beautiful wife, Janelle, who is here with us today. We've been married for 8 years. Seems like a lifetime because God knew what he was doing, right? He connected us before we even knew that we were supposed to be a union. But more so, even, I'll say more important than anything we get to do, we get to shepherd and steward over these two beautiful children. Our daughter Nova, who just turned 4 on the 27th of this month. So, and as you can see, she is, by that smile up there, she is the most rambunctious, risk-taking, just vibrant little girl. She keeps us on our toes. She challenges us. And then you have Jace, our son, who is 6. He is the sensitive, I guess more spiritual little guy. He loves to read the Bible. We used to read him the Bible, and he can literally quote stories and tell us the characters, everything out of the Bible, and he just loves it. He's into the arts and music and things of that nature. So we just love shepherding over those two little ones as much as possible. How did I come to be a part of City Church? At the onset, when Pastor Chris was planning to plant the church, I had an opportunity to sit down with he and Jordan Applegate as they were talking about what do they want this church to look like. And those of you who have been around for a while know that we want this to be a multi-ethnic, multi-generational, multi-economic church. And if I can be transparent, one of the questions that Pastor Chris asked me is, I don't want the congregation to be full of people who just look like me, right? So he said, how do we make it multi-ethnic? And I said, well, Pastor Chris, the reality is we don't want to go out and get people. We want to create an environment and a culture in the church that allows people to feel authentically them and come. And when they come, they stay, right? That's the goal, right? We don't want to put out marketing materials to say we welcome all. Yes, we want to welcome all in a sense, but we want to create such an environment and a family here that when people, no matter what walk of life they come from, they feel at home and they stay. That's the goal. So that's what we set out to do, and I've been a part of City Church since the onset, so about 5 years now, and it's been an amazing journey. Really quickly, a little bit about what I do outside of City Church. My wife and I co-founded a company called Courageous Healing, Inc. We opened up a mental health facility in Southeast Fort Wayne, nonprofit organization, where we set out to decrease the stigma around mental health for underserved BIPOC populations. We do it unapologetically to meet people where they are because we understand the trauma and things of that nature that people in underserved communities go through. We serve anyone, but again, unapologetically, the population that we focus most on is the underserved BIPOC population. We're not the healers. Let me say that. We're not the healers. We know who the healer is, right? We know that God is the ultimate healer, but we facilitate the healing. So again, that's what we do. And again, my name is Aaron Lane, and I'm excited to be here with you all.
Good morning. My name is Kevin Butler. Let's see, my family moved around a lot when we were little kids, but landed here in Fort Wayne in 1989 and started going to a little church on the north side of town called Pine Hills Church. It was about 150 people at that time, across the road from Pine Valley, which is where we lived, and kind of stayed at that church ever since. So this is a church plant from Pine Hills. So I've got do the math for me real quick, 32 years at this church in a way, kind of. So, but I grew up at Pine Valley on the north side, like I said, and my wife grew up in Huntertown. So we're both local to Fort Wayne. Went through the school system up there. Went to Carroll High School, and yeah, go Chargers. Right on. And then went to college, and I came back and actually was a high school math teacher at Carroll High School for 5 years as well. So I'm still running into students every now and then. They're like, "Are you?" "Yeah, are you Mr. Butler?" It's like, "No, it's just Kevin now." But we've been in Fort Wayne and been invested in the city the whole time, and just kind of we're back at Pine Hills Church, and it moved to the new location. For any of you who were there, know it, on the north side of town. And when that church was kind of going through the process of becoming a church planting church, a church that wants to grow people and send people out, we're kind of part of that journey, and that became part of our desire and interest. So when this church, we didn't want to move those. It's kind of we don't want to move to Denver or to Kendallville for some of the other church plants, but when there was the opportunity to be a part of birthing a new church in Fort Wayne, which is the city where we felt like we were called to, we're like, yeah, we're on board for that. So we moved down from the north side of town to Wildwood Avenue, a few blocks from here, and have been there for the last 5 years, part of this church. So yeah, really glad and thankful for that. That's our crew up there. My wife Beth, she homeschools those 3 crazy clowns every day. Emery's 10 years old, Calvin is 8, and Alethea is 5. And it's just a blast for me to come home and find out how the day went at school all day long. Christoph, you know the battle. So
It's awesome.
yeah, it's an awesome, amazing thing. But she's amazing doing that. And I work at a software company on the north side of town in kind of strategy and transformation, helping to grow that business. So that's my day job after moving out of education. Is that it? Did I cover all the questions?
Yep, that's great.
Nailed it.
Thanks. Yeah, so today we are talking about what it looks like to fight from rest. And if you're a parent, immediately in my mind, it conjured up this image of trying to transfer a sleeping toddler and getting a fist in the eye and then fighting through rest. But that's not the fight from rest that we're talking about here. We're really looking at what does it look like to rest in such a way that enables us and equips us to fight the good fight. And so with the series, it seems like really action-oriented, really focused on the action. Rest seems like a kind of an unusual topic. So Christoph, will you share with us why are we even talking about rest?
Well, I would like to ask anyone who feels tired or has felt tired in last week to raise their hand. Okay, those that are not, you're probably lying, like Pastor Chris would say. So the Bible says a lot about rest, and we're gonna try to deep dive into some of those. But we thought we would start with something practical and a passage that is practical. And so, if you take the book of Matthew, which is the first book of the Bible, if you go to chapter 11, verse 28 and 30. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. One song that we sung today that really impacted me is, come as you are. And I think this passage really talks about 2 rests. And the first rest is an invitation. You just come as you are. You may be tired. You may be burdened. You may have like something in your life that is heavy on you, and it's just a gift of grace. It's a little bit like a little child that run to his parent and just like give him a big hug, and that's really like what God has invited us to do. If you're tired, just come, and I will give you rest. The second rest is more conditional. So he talked about taking his yoke and putting it on us, and I love as Jesus, or all through the Bible, there's all these crazy stories, and this one sounds crazy to me, but it's a bit like saying human are like ox. We were built for yoke, so we all work. And my yoke is easy means appropriate and custom fit. And back in the days, if the yoke was jot, it was not like custom fit, it could actually almost damage the ox. But if it was customed and if it was fitting well, then the ox was able to pull a lot more and work a lot, with a better, I would say, ratio, but also in a much, much healthier way. And so I think here Jesus is encouraging us to learn from him about how to take his yoke. And so as you think about that, just I would challenge you to think, okay, if you're really tired, first of all, just come. The invitation is there, and just receive the rest of grace. But then if you're willing to, just go on a journey, and it's a journey, right? But just as you go a little deeper into the Word, as you get to know a little bit more about Jesus and his plan for your life, then you can also receive that maybe rest from calling.
So I love that. Can everybody hear me okay? Christoph, you referred to our yoke being custom made or custom fit for us to be able to carry so that the burden doesn't become too heavy. And I think a lot of times what happens is, and when you ask the question of how many people are tired, a lot of individuals are tired not because we're carrying our own yoke, but because we're carrying the yoke of other people. We're carrying the yoke and the burden of our work, of our family, right? And it gets heavy, right? It gets tiring. So I think if we were to look at it from the standpoint of what yoke should we be carrying? Whose burdens should we be carrying? Now, I don't want you to take that as me saying you shouldn't be caring for other people, because you should. But you have to take care of yourself before you can truly help and take care of other people. I was introduced to a good book through my social work process. I'm also a social worker, and it's called The Body Keeps the Score, right? Because what happens when your burden becomes too heavy is mentally you can tell yourself, I can keep going, I can push, I can keep it up, right? But what's happening to your body? It's breaking down, right? A lot of us deal with health issues. A lot of us deal with a lot of things, and we're trying to figure out what's going on with our bodies. How is it connected? Well, the reality is your body's keeping the score. And if you don't learn how to temper yourselves and rest when you need to, your body will make you slow down and rest.
It's almost like God created us that way. I don't know, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. It's amazing how God knows how to make you sit down and make you rest. And I think if we, and a lot of times our body pushes us to that point. So I think that's just amazing, because sometimes if you don't put on the custom yoke, it can be
It's like if you were trying to put my shirt on, right? Like that would be wrong. Sorry.
Come on, man. I was thinking, like in Psalm 23, it says, "He makes me lie down in green pastures." Right? It's like I'm gonna make you lay down and take a break. Something I thought interesting about that passage that you're talking about, Matthew 11, is that it's not like Jesus says we're gonna throw off the yoke and not do any work, but he says I'm gonna give you essentially like a better way to carry the weight, or like a better way to work. And I'm gonna give you a yoke that is easy and light. You're weary and burdened, like you're carrying all this weight, but you're doing it in the wrong way, or you're choosing the wrong burden. I'm going to show you how to live and carry the burdens that life sends you, but to do it in the right way, like a custom fit backpack or a shirt that fits just right, that puts all the weight in all the right places. And I think that's kind of one way that we can look at what it looks like to become a disciple of Jesus. Is I want to live the way that he lived. Like I'm going to take on his practices. Like how did he do it? Because he said, from the first day until now, my Father's been working and I'm too am working. So Jesus was a worker. He was doing the work, but he had a way of carrying the load and doing the work that was restful. So how do we find that restful way of doing the work, patterning our lives after Jesus in the way that he did it, so that we don't wear ourselves down?
Right, so it's not escaping work, it's doing the work in the way that Jesus has called us to, and doing the work that he's called us to. But as we think about our lives, and I think about my week, and it is just filled with activities, with demands, with kids, with school and work, and trying to run from one thing to the next. And this idea of rest, this idea of being able to stop and pause seems unrealistic. It seems like, how do I fit one more thing in when I have all of these things to do? And so, Aaron, why is rest so hard? Why is it so hard for us to find time to do this?
Great question. And as I was thinking about this question and the best way to articulate it and answer it, I feel like I'm a living example of why rest is so hard, because for me, it has been a journey of learning to rest. So I think through sharing some of my own personal journey, if you will kind of allow me to elaborate on a couple different points. So I have an athletic background, and I went to Snyder High School and played sports. I played at St. Francis for a year and a half, then went on to play at Purdue. And then I was free agent to the Miami Dolphins, had a brief stint with them, and then played arena ball for a couple years. And I tell you that not to tell you that I was this great athlete, but to tell you that the most important part of that was after sports ended for me, from an identity standpoint, I was lost, right? And sports allowed me to stay busy, allowed me to go from one thing to the next, right? Always being occupied with doing something. But when sports ended for me, it put me in a place of, yes, being lost from an identity standpoint, but also it then started to shed light on a lot of things that I didn't want to focus on. So as that helmet came off and I was searching for my identity, I put a new helmet on. I also refer to it as a new mask. And what that mask was busyness. Because busyness allowed me to go from doing one thing to the next and staying occupied. Because it, again, my own trauma, my own personal traumas, my family situations, all those things that I wanted to avoid and not deal with, busyness allowed me to escape that. So oftentimes as individuals, we'll put on this mask or this helmet of being busy in order to really do the work that we need to do, in order to address some things that will really fully usher us into a place of rest. I had a wise man tell me one time, because he was kind of talking to me about being busy and doing so much. He said, if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. And I was like, whoa, right? It hit me because I wasn't able to focus on what God was calling me to and the mission that God had me on because I was so busy doing so many other things. Because the reality is, if I'm honest and truthful with myself, I was searching for significance. I was searching because sports gave me such an identity and such a sense of significance that once I lost that, I had to find out what makes Aaron Lane significant. So I wanted my hands in some of everything. I wanted to be doing some of everything. I wanted to be serving. And it did. I became significant, but at a cost, right? Again, the body keeps the score. So I just, for my own personal journey, it's been this process of learning what rest looks like. And not so much for me even from a physical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint. Because oftentimes it's my mind that's racing because I'm a dreamer, right? I'm a dreamer. I can dream up some stuff and some ideas, and my wife is like, bro, slow down, right? But oftentimes it's because, again, I don't want to focus on those things. And it requires a lot of mental energy to do that. So I want to do something with you all here real quick to kind of paint this picture. How many of you are present here with us today? Right? All of you raise your hands and say, I'm present, I'm here. And physically you are here. How many of you are mentally here? Right? All of you are raising your hand. But if I ask you, what are you thinking about right now? Some of you are thinking about, what are you doing for lunch after this? Who you got to meet up with? Getting kids ready for Halloween. I got to drop people off here and there. So are you truly present? And oftentimes we're so caught up with all the things that's going on in our heads that we're tired. You're sitting in this chair and you will leave here exhausted and tired because of the mental energy that you're using, thinking about things that you can't even do while you're sitting here in these chairs. So that's where I found myself for so long, is in this place of learning how to rest. So one, you have to ask yourself the tough questions. Am I putting on a helmet or a mask of busyness in order to run from things that I should be truly focused on or addressing? Two, am I chasing significance, whether that's a dollar, right? It's countercultural, right? We got to get to the bag, right? We got to grind hard. We got to work harder than everybody else. All these things. What are you chasing that's keeping you from rest? So again, I had to ask myself those tough questions. So I invite you into asking yourself those tough questions as well so that you can fully accept the invitation that God is calling you upon to rest.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we look for that significance, and it might be through our job. But I think there are often other times we look for significance in really what what we could put out on social media. Like, can I plan the perfect kid's birthday party? Can I have the perfect family photos? Can I have this image? And we are chasing that image and wanting to keep up with everyone else's image and thinking that that is going to satisfy. But we find that it's like you might get that little hit of like, oh yeah, that was great, but then it's empty. It doesn't truly satisfy, and we still have that endless searching and that endless seeking after more and more and more.
Yeah, one thing I love about this church is Pastor Chris is very practical, and often when he preached from here, he preached to himself. And I think he's kind of like a funny sense of humor that he asks us to come here and talk about rest because we're not the greatest people at resting. But that reminds me, too, that a lot of churches really fail when their lead pastor gets to burn out. And often pastors burn out because of either one of those two things, lack of rest and lack of affirmation. For the rest part, as elders, we try to really hold each other accountable. But I would encourage you today, just affirm your pastor. Pastors never get enough affirmation. And so I would just encourage you today to do like hashtag I love my pastor, hashtag Chris is awesome, hashtag City Church FW.
Did you just say hashtag?
Is that what I'm supposed to say, or ads?
Hashtag. There's an H in there.
Hashtag. All right.
That's all right.
That's
He's
the H
French.
there.
If you're over 40, it's the pound sign.
I do my best.
You're doing great. He knows like 15 languages, so I have no room to talk.
Well, talking about languages, just wanted to invite you into also a different perspective about work ethics. So we often talk about, the U.S., like people working really hard. So we're going to watch a little video, and then we'll talk a little bit about that difference.
Why do we work so hard? For what? For this? For stuff? Other countries because they work, they stroll home, they stop by the cafe, they take August off. Off. Why aren't you like that? Why aren't we like that? Because we're crazy, driven, hard-working believers, that's why. Those other countries think we're nuts. Whatever. Were the Wright brothers insane? Bill Gates, Les Paul, Ali. Were we nuts when we pointed to the moon? That's right. We went up there, and you know what we got? Bored. So we left. Got a car up there, left the keys in it. Do you know why? Because we're the only ones going back up there, that's why. But I digress. It's pretty simple. You work hard, you create your own luck, and you gotta believe anything is possible. As for all the stuff, that's the upside of only taking 2 weeks off in August. N'est-ce pas?
So no surprise to all of you, but there's a love-hate relationship between the US and France.
Yeah, I heard that Americans work on average about 500 hours more a year than the French.
Oh, easily. So to give you an idea, just to give you context, about 15, 18 years ago, there's a law in France that passed that basically say the average, like the minimum work, people work 35 hours. So we work 35 hours per week. We get 5 weeks paid vacation. We get 12 days bank holidays. If you work extra hours, so let's say you work 40 hours instead of 35, those 5 hours, you got the choice to either get paid for it or take it into extra holiday time. 90% of French people will go for vacation time instead of taking the pay. What? Because they really value having more time for themselves, for their family. About 4 years ago, Huntington University started an MBA program, and my former employer was part of that, and I was asked to be a teacher for that first MBA class, and I was teaching international studies. So I took a group of 19 students, along with some spouses and teachers, it was 30 of us, and we went and visited 10 companies in 6 different cities in 4 different countries. So we went to Switzerland, France, Austria, and Germany. And when we came back from those 12 days of international study, I did a little survey and I asked them a question. I say, what is the most noticeable difference that you see between the work ethic in the US versus Europe? Everybody came back with the same answer with maybe different words, but it was actually more than a statement, it was a question. And the question was, why are we working so hard? And I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to say, one is better than the other. In fact, I haven't lived in France for 20 years, and I've been here for 6.5 years, and I love the culture of hard working. But the question remains, why are we working so hard?
I think that's a great question. Because what it gets down to, like for me, I hear that question, I'm like, man, what am I working so hard? So it makes me kind of examine my heart a little bit and like ask the question for myself, Kevin, when you're working hard, what are you working hard for? And honest with myself, because as Pastor Chris would say, church, you got to be honest, right? Being honest with myself, it's a lot of times just because I feel like I'm getting my value from what I produce, or I feel like if I stop producing or I stop accomplishing things, then maybe I'm not going to be as as worthwhile to society, to the people around me. I'm getting too much meaning or value from my output, and that doesn't just go for a job. Like that can go for anything. It's kind of like you said, even on social media. Like I'm afraid that if I stop doing great things and taking pictures of it and producing, then I'm going to lose a sense of value or worth that I get from that. So I think it's a great question for our hearts. And like so, this fits into this series of fighting from rest. And I think one of the spiritual connections is that Dallas Willard said that hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life. And I feel that. So it's, if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. I feel that tension that it's this idea of just being hurried and rushed and always trying to justify my existence by doing one more thing, keeping up, getting this project done, doing all these things in order to be basically seen and kind of try to justify why I'm worthwhile is a way of the devil keeping me busy and keeping me distracted because it keeps me ineffective. If he can't make me bad, he'll make me busy. And by being busy, he's going to distract me from a lot of the real work that he wants to do in my life, which is things that take time and space and intentionality and reflection to produce. Like the fruit of the Spirit is something that grows slowly over time. And love is something that takes time and relationship and intentionality and presence. Like, so there's all these things that grow slowly over time. And if I'm always hurrying, trying to produce, I've got like this heart sickness that is making me ineffective in the fight that God is calling us into.
I have never been less spiritual than trying to get all of 4 of my children in the car and to someplace on time. So like that is, and usually it's like church things too. We're like, get in the car right now, we need to go. And it is the worst. It's the worst. And that feeling of hurry. And I think there are times that we fill our lives so much that we are so busy that we feel like we need to escape. Like I deserve this. And the question of like, do you have time to spend time in the Word? No, I'm too busy. Do I have time to pray? No, I'm too busy. And yet if I really look at my life and I look at the time that I spend, there are these moments in between one thing and the next. And what do I fill those moments with? If I'm honest, it's opening social media or it's just checking the news. And it's like, there are moments that add up to a lot more than I ever want to admit that the stinking phone tells you about now. Why does it tell us? Because it's a good accountability that it tells you, man, this is how much time I'm spending on this, on things that don't actually bring me real rest, that don't actually rejuvenate my soul, but in reality make me feel more anxious and more concerned and more like, oh, I should be doing more things and I should be better at this and I should look better at this. And I think that is there's a difference between rest that really brings life and escape. And I think sometimes we think, oh, all I need is just a vacation. I just need to like get away from all the things in my life. But in reality, this rest that we're talking about is so much deeper than that. It's a rest that really brings life. It's not just escaping our circumstances. It's not just escaping even like getting a time away from my kids. It's how am I really being filled up? And so, Kevin, will you share with us just a little bit about what does Scripture say about this real rest? Not just escape, but the rest that God has called us to.
Yeah. So we're gonna go Genesis to Revelation here as quick as I can on the topic of work and rest. So whirlwind Bible tour on what the Bible says about work and rest. So starting in Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, I have some passages on the screen. The Bible starts with work and rest on the very first page. It says, on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. He blessed the seventh day and made it holy because he rested from his work that he had done in creation. So at the very beginning, we see a pattern and a rhythm of work and rest built in. And that word rest is actually the word Shabbat, which is where Sabbath comes from. And it really means stop. So it just means like God created for 6 days and he stopped. He stopped. And the reason he stopped is not because he was tired, right? Like we stop when we get tired, the inevitability of rest, the body tells the score. But God stopped. He wasn't tired. He wasn't worn out. He stopped because he said, I worked, I created, I made this beautiful universe, this beautiful world, and now I'm gonna stop. I'm going to rest and I'm going to enjoy and settle into the goodness of the world that I created. And it wasn't like, he had to finish up that in a day because he had another universe to start creating on Monday. Like he stopped. Like that was where the biblical story was intended to sit. Like seventh day, perfect rest, perfect world. That was it. That was the ideal. And God rested because it's good to be in that state of rest in his creation. But oh, sorry, not but yet. We'll get to that, number 3. But second passage is Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. We have a part to play in this picture as well. That says that the Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it. And I think this is really important for us to realize that work is not a result of sin, that work is something that predated sin. God worked and created the world, and he put us in the garden to then kind of join in him with the work that he'd done. He created us in his image. He created the world, made it good, and then said, I'm going to put these people there who are created in my image, and they're going to kind of carry on the work that I started. Taking all of this raw material that I created, I'm going to make creators who are like me to be creative and take the world and continue cultivating it, continue like recombining all those raw materials in new ways, and kind of unfolding and unlocking the beauty of his world. And that's the way that it was intended to be. But work wasn't like we have it now. Work was intended to be just kind of this beautiful, restful activity of being creative and unfolding the goodness of creation. And that's where we were. Genesis chapter 3, human beings said, no, that's great, but I think I can do better. I'm going to take matters into my own hands. And the result of that, one of the results of that, was that work suffered as a result of that curse which sin brought into the world. So work, which was intended to be something that was joyful, creative, collaborative, instead turned into this idea of painful toil that we had to do just in order to stay alive and to find out where our next meal was going to come from. So rather than the ground yielding up its fruit almost effortlessly, it turned into the situation where Adam has to sweat and labor and toil just to get the thorns and the thistles aside so he has enough to eat, and doing that for his whole life, and is going to be ground down by this toil back into dust from which he came from. So work was ruined by sin, but it did predate sin. Our experience of it is kind of this Genesis 3 idea, but that's not what work was intended to originally be. And that kind of sets up the whole rest of the biblical arc and narrative, which is God created it good. It was ruined and destroyed by sin, but God didn't give up on it, and he's going to find a way to return people and his creation to the good intention he had for it with this seventh day rest of people in the garden doing good work. A good next stop on the journey is Exodus chapter 20. This is the first telling of the 10 Commandments, which we're all familiar with. And the fourth commandment is, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And then he tells the people, you're not going to do any work. Not you, not anybody in your family, nobody who's visiting with you, not even your animals. Nobody's going to do work. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy because I worked and I rested, and this is the way that it's supposed to be. And he gives them this command to rest. And remembering that rest or Sabbath, that word remember the Sabbath means to stop. Really, he's saying, remember to stop. Like, remember not to keep going as if your life depends upon you. Remember to stop. And this really was a super duper countercultural thing to do at that time. Like nowadays, it's cultural to take 2 days off, right? Or to have 2 days off work, I guess. The weekend is kind of built into our society, and we have the convenience to do that. I don't worry that I'm not going to have food to eat because McDonald's will be open. There's a grocery store down the street. It'll be okay. But this was big time countercultural when you literally had to grow the food that you ate. To stop a day and to do nothing, like this was like really kind of putting yourself out there. Not only was it just a little inconvenient, like it was actually maybe even a little bit risky, but he says, remember to stop. And I think there's maybe kind of two parts to that. One is remember to stop because that's what I did. I want you to remember what life is really all about. It's not just about working and providing for yourself. And the other reason is I want you to practice what we're looking forward to, which is this is where I want my world to be again someday. So it's remembering, looking back, and it's also practicing looking forward. And practices are things that we put into place, rhythms that have a way of shaping and transforming our hearts through our practices. And really what's going on here is saying, I want you to remember to stop because your life doesn't depend upon you. So like we were confessing earlier, your life consists of more than just what you can provide for yourself. I want you to stop and to rest. So centuries pass, since that command was given. You got the whole story of the Old Testament and Israel and all those things. And then Jesus comes onto the scene. It's kind of the apex and climax of the Bible. And in Matthew 2:27, he kind of brings up this idea of Sabbath again. So what had happened over years and years and years and years is the Jewish people had built what they called a fence around the law. So this command to stop and rest turned into this, they said, well, how are we going to make sure we keep that command? With a good heart, how are we going to make sure we do it? And they put all sorts of rules in place, like you're not allowed to pick up more than this much weight, and you're not allowed to walk more than this distance, and all these things you could or couldn't do to protect the Sabbath. And Jesus comes on the scene and says, I understand the heart behind that, but you guys are missing it. Like you're missing what the actual purpose and intention of it was. You've turned rest into a rule, right, that you feel guilty about, like trying to accomplish. And he says this, he says, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. He's like, you weren't created to keep the rule. The Sabbath was created as a gift and an invitation to you. The Sabbath is a gift. It's not a rule to follow. It's a gift to us and a reminder of this is what God did, this is what the world's supposed to be, this is what we're going to enjoy in the future, and I want you to stop and transform your hearts by putting a practice into place that reminds you that your life consists more of just what you can produce and more than just your work. And just a couple things to wrap that up. That feels to me a lot like the Sabbath being to time as tithing is to money. If we give not because God needs our money, but because it's a way of taking our first fruits and reminding ourselves that it's not just a tenth that belongs to God, but really it's all His. And by inconveniencing myself in that way, it reminds me that, yeah, really all of my resources belong to God. And the Sabbath is kind of the same way. It's not as like God needs a day. It's not that it has to be a literal 24 hours out of the week, but it's a way of inconveniencing myself or arranging my schedule such that I'm forced to remember that not all of my life consists of just what I can do and what I can produce. And I think that Walter Brueggemann said it really well when he said that people who Sabbath well live all 7 days differently. It's not about finding one day to escape from your work. It's about transforming our hearts in such a way that we live all of our life out of this place of rest, knowing that it's God who provides for us and not us who have to provide for ourselves.
So as you were reading that, Kevin, it was in my head, I'm like, wow, this stuff sounds amazing. Like, I wish I could find the time to stop, right? Or like the video said, to take a month off. But then I come back to reality. And I'm like, wait, I got a company to run, I got babies to raise, I got a wife to tend to, I got friends to appease to, and it's like, where am I going to find even time to stop, right? And obviously it takes intentionality. It takes prioritizing rest. But then I think sometimes, culturally, when we think about rest, we also often think of this big elaborate, this vacation we need to go on, or these hour-long massages, or this extensive amount of time that I have to put in a rest, when really we're so out of rhythm of where God has called us to be, we're so out of alignment, that really it just takes intentionality in small moments, right? It's creating the moments in order to get on a rhythm that then allows you to fully walk into what God has called you to. So I reference another book, The Power of the Pause, right? It teaches you about pausing in the moment and just taking time to be still for a minute, 5 minutes, right? In the busyness of your day, when everything around you is chaotic, how do you find that time to go for a 1-minute walk and explore nature? How do you find time to put your phone down and just think, right? Instead of needing constant stimulation, right? We live in a world of constant stimulation. Oftentimes, I've been in the mode where I get home sometime, and I'm like, man, I had a million things to get done today, and I feel like I got none of it done. Anybody ever been there? Right? And oftentimes, it's not about that not having enough time. I had one person tell me one time, it's not that you don't have time, or it's not about time management, it's about attention management. Not time management, attention management, because if you focus on getting done what you need to get done in the moment, instead of when your phone goes off, you pick your phone up, that's taken away from what you were doing, right? So it's this need for constant stimulation that often causes us to be in this place of overcapacity of doing. So for me, I want to make it practical and think about how do we create these moments, these small windows of time that we can allow ourselves to just pause and rest versus these big elaborate things. Because at some point we will get to the elaborate vacations and taking weeks off at a time and months off at a time, but we're not there yet if we're real, right? I know moms out there, right? My wife is often like, I wish I just had a moment where I can go to the restroom by myself, where I don't have a kid pulling on me and knocking on the door.
Ever.
It's like,
Ever.
just give me 2 minutes by myself, right? This moment to just be, right? So how do we create those moments? I think is important to talk about.
I think even being aware that there's going to be different seasons of life. So what is going to work when you have young kids is going to be different than somebody who has teenagers. And so I think even finding those moments, like I remember when I had babies and I was waking up all throughout the night to feed them, and like it was very easy to just sit and scroll on my phone. But even taking those moments to stop and put the phone down and pray over that baby, and to pray and ask God, what do you have for me today? And I think sometimes we aren't present in those moments, and so we turn to those distractions, and so we don't find the rest that we need. But it does take that intentionality.
Yeah, no, I told you that we've been homeschooling our kids now for a bit over a year, and the curriculum is called My Father's World, and this year it's about creation to Egypt, and with that, part of the curriculum is to experience 6 Jewish celebrations. And so one of them was to do a Sabbath, and it was challenging, but it was also good. Like on a Friday afternoon, just trying to clean the house, and then cooking. We told you we love cooking, so doing the challah bread and the soup and all the dish. And then taking the time around the table just to go a little bit of tradition. And I agree with what Kevin said. Like there's a lot of constraint that have been added to it, but just taking the intentionality of taking a time to pause and just even enjoy a simple meal without technology or without any business. And then the goal is to continue that through the whole Saturday, which we did somewhat, but not really completely. And then you finish on Saturday with a meal to just kind of close these 24 hours of Sabbath. But I think we're trying just to maybe give some ideas as to how you can create those moments and rest.
Yeah, so how do we do this practically? What are some ways we can approach this? How can we actually make this a part of our lives?
Yes, I really connect with what you said, Christoph, about, or maybe it was you, Sarah, but being different in different stages of life. So we, in our home, I don't know, maybe it was a couple years ago, we thought, man, we really, we feel like there's too much going on. We need to be better at resting so that, the whole weekend's not just full of projects and things. So we're going to put a Sabbath practice into place, and, from Friday evening until Sunday evening, we're not going to do this, that, and the other. And we kind of designed what we thought this ideal perfect day would look like. And I'm an introvert. I love to read. So I'm like, I'm going to be lighting a candle and putting some cool jazz on Spotify. I'm going to be reading a book, in my favorite chair. This is going to be so awesome. This is going to be such a restful day. And it bombed. It totally bombed because we have little kids and they're like, we want to play Legos. And they're coming in and just trying to I want to have this perfect day that I designed for myself. But it just doesn't fit in life. And I found out that there's a difference between, I think, rest and maybe like a day off. There's a difference like indulging in my hobbies and this kind of rest. And trying to do exactly what I wanted to do just didn't work in that time of life. And I was encouraged by a friend recently that, one of the things that means, that being at rest means is, like we said earlier, not being in a hurry. And slowing down and being present in the moment with whatever I'm doing and with the people that are around me. And at least that idea has been really helpful for us in our family. So rather than trying to create my perfect day, just being okay with what is it that my kids want to do today, and saying yes to that and taking time for it and being fully present in whatever that moment is, and making sure that we are slowing down, breathing deeply. So I think we got 3 bullet points on the screen. One thing that I, just as a practical idea for me would be spending time outside. That's been really good for us in a lot of ways, especially in the fall when it's crisp and the leaves are changing. It's really beautiful. And one thing that does is it gets us away from screens. It gets us away from home projects. It gets me away from the stuff that even when I'm at my house, I feel like I ought to be doing. And it puts us out in creation where it's easy to see the glory of God and easy to reflect. It puts us in a place where it's quiet. And I found that just really kind of helps me to breathe deeply and slow down. And it helps me be present with the people that I'm with, because I don't have anything else to do but walk and talk with those people that I'm with. So, if Calvin, my 8-year-old, wants to tell me all about Minecraft, then, I hear all about Minecraft. And that's fine. I'm not like, I'm too busy to listen to that. Whatever's on his mind, I can make the time and listen. Or if it's just silent and nobody's talking, then I've got time to reflect and pray and reconnect with God. So that's an idea that's been really helpful for us.
Yeah, mine is similarities. My practical invitation to you today is to consider taking a retreat. Whether you have a relationship with Jesus or you don't, there's such a power in going away on your own and just reflect and just pray. Or there's lots of examples in the Bible. Jesus himself, when he was with his disciple all day, was escaping from time to time and just going on a retreat. And he was not taking anything with him. He was not taking a Bible, a book, his iPhone, a computer. He was just going on his own and just trying to really spend time with God, with his Father. And so practical ways to do that. If you're married, maybe what you can do is once a quarter or once per year, you get your spouse to watch the kids and you escape for half a day or a day. And you just go and find a lake, find a forest, and you're just going to walk and just be on your own in a moment of stillness. If you're a single parent, to be honest, here as a community, I think we can help each other. And so if you're a single parent with kids and you need that time, once a quarter or twice a year, let us know. Maybe through Sarah or someone else at church, but we'll find someone that come alongside so you can
and
take
that's
that
really
moment.
what our small groups are designed to be, coming alongside each other, and to be that family community, to come alongside and be like, hey, we're going to take your kids so that you can have this experience with God.
So yeah, just taking that moment for yourself and then just having a little bit of peace and stillness, I think would be a very good practical way to find some rest.
And for me, my rest begins with calming my mind. Oftentimes, it's hard for me to get into a place of relaxation if my mind is all over the place and busy. So for me, it's this calming of the mind and breathing, right? Because you mentioned hurry, always being in a hurry. And oftentimes, we take for granted even just breath, right? And just breathing, because we do it so naturally. And oftentimes, when we're in a hurry, we're taking these fast, shallow breaths. But the breathing that I'm talking about is diaphragmatic breathing, where literally you're inhaling through your nose and filling up your belly with air and holding it, and then you're releasing through your mouth. I'm talking these long, deep, calming breaths that tells your body you're in a safe place. There's peace. You can rest, and it's okay. So I have to literally take myself there, and the best way for me to get there is through worship. And literally finding myself on my knees and breathing and praying, or just being on the floor, or whatever that is. So we want to invite you into that place right now, because oftentimes we're in the busyness of everything we have going on, we don't know how to find it. But God is saying, I'm giving you an invitation to rest, and it's okay. So we want to invite you into that place, to even just go to God right now and say, God, in my 50, 60, 80 hours that I'm working a week, I need you to help me find rest. And just walk into that invitation right now. We're going to have some keys behind us. You can find yourself on your knees or on the floor, standing and walking, whatever it is that you need in this moment to walk into that invitation. We ask that you do that right now.
Father, we thank you for the invitation to calm our thoughts and our minds, our hurriedness, and just be with you. We thank you that this is not another thing on our to-do list and another thing that we're supposed to do to try to prove ourselves to you, but it really is practicing who you've called us to be. And yet, Lord, I confess that it is so easy to fall into that striving for significance through my activities, even spiritual activities. And Lord, I pray that you will renew my mind, change our hearts to see you as you really are. Father, give us eyes to see that the things in our life that maybe we need to let go of, and we need to stop pursuing so that we can pursue what is truly best, the life that you have called us into. And Lord, sometimes those sacrifices are hard and I don't want to make them. But Lord, I know that you have something better for us. And Father, I just thank you for your grace and the gift that you have given us, and that we can come to you as we are, not having cleaned up our life first, but that you take us and you don't leave us there. Lord, I pray that we will find ways to carve out that time, to prioritize that time, to spend time with you and to find rest, not only for our minds, but for our souls. That when we are truly connected with you, it gives us the right perspective in all of these other areas, in all of these good things that we are doing, that they aren't ultimate things. And Lord, we pray that we will trust you. We will trust that even in our choosing to stop and spend time with you, that you will provide. You will provide for us personally. You will provide for our families. Lord, I pray that we will continue to lean in to this true rest that you have invited us into. And we just thank you so much. So much for your love that you have given us. We pray these things in your name. Amen.